Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study of the entire Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. We are in Ruth, the book of Ruth, chapter 2. This is a fascinating book because it tells the story of a woman who would become the great grandmother of David, King David, which means she is in the direct bloodline of Jesus. And she starts off as a Moabitess. Now, I didn't get into a lot of the scholarly details of the book in the last study. As you know, I don't. There's a couple of reasons why I don't. One, there, look, the scholarly work is only as good as the facts, and oftentimes theology commentaries they're men's opinion, and so when you read if you have a study Bible and you read all of the background or introduction and notes to the books, and they get to arguing about who wrote whatever book, okay, I don't get into that. I will acknowledge there are some scholarly things that's objectionable or questionable or things we need to know about. Here's a good example. The book of Ruth is not the name that God had given this book. So at some point, scholars attached that name. Most of the titles of the books of the Bible or titles that scholars attach to it and not God. So for example, Numbers, right? So, we can go on and on. But anyway, so that's why I don't get into a lot of those discussions. They're there for you. If you have a study Bible, there's a wealth of information and a wealth of a way to get to those studies. I don't get that. Our purpose is to study, again, verse by verse, the Bible itself. And of course, remember, even the chapters and verses themselves are not a part of the original text or the writing. They were added by translators. All right, so the book itself, really, and the purpose of all of the books, remember, is so much is to focus on the bloodline of Jesus. And so that's pretty much, you have a main plot, and then you have the subplot. And then from time to time, we'll see, just like here, that this story, as brief as it is, as concise as it is, right, starts off in the land of Moab. Then they come back to Bethlehem. And so Ruth is a Moabite, from pagan origins, who finds faith. One of the most interesting things about Ruth is by living among and with Naomi, a godly woman, she comes to faith. And when you contrast that with her other sister-in-law, Oprah, who they lived some 10 years with Naomi, she goes back to her culture, her gods, her paganism, idolatry. And this was one of the kind of interesting about Ruth, okay? All right, so Ruth chapter 2. And they have now returned. They left because of a famine. That famine is lifted. They have food. Ruth comes back. And again, we're over a 10-year period of time. And Moab comes back to her. She's better than a daughter. She's closer than a daughter. And more important, she has embraced the one and true God, Yahweh. All right, so verse 1. It says, now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side named Boaz. He was a prominent man of noble character from Elimelech's family. Now, I want you to notice right off again the noble character. Now, we're going to see that character. And that's going to be very interesting right here. Again, my subplot to this also is if you want to get married, how to overcome fear, how to overcome your own. I'm going to come out of this for a minute. I didn't mean to go this way, but I'll stick with this. But if you want to get married, there are singles who have been single for years, right? And oftentimes their excuse is, I'm just waiting for God to send me a right person. Okay. And yes, that's good. You should do that. But more than that, you should be a person of character. And then that character, okay, that character is what will, more than anything else, grab someone's attention. All right, let's get back to that. All right, verse 2. Ruth the Moabitess asked Naomi, will you let me go into the fields to gather fallen grains behind someone who allows me to? Naomi answered her, go ahead, my daughter. So Ruth left and entered the field to gather grain behind a harvester, and she happened to be in the portion of the land belonging to Boaz, who was from Elimelech's family. Now, this is very interesting because I would say these are not happenstance. And if you remember in the book of the law, now as tedious as it was going through, now we can kind of see some of the things that the law was talking about. And one of the commandments in the law was that a farmer, as he was threshing, if fruit or or anything that he was harvesting fell to the ground, he was to leave it there for the poor people. Now we see Ruth here, who is now coming to glean, as they call it, and this what this purpose was. They were poor, and so they would gather this. They would gather this food, okay, and then they would eat from it. You can say this was like a social welfare. And interesting enough that even though God did make allowances for the poor, notice that they had to work to get it. Okay, unlike our welfare system today, but I do digress. You also see too how humble Ruth was, that she went and started gleaning in Boaz's field. She was just there gleaning. And it's also possible, even though the scriptures doesn't bring this out, that she was kind of despised being a Moabite. You know, in other words, you can tell back then people knew who the different people were. All right, verse 4. Later, when Boaz arrived from Bethlehem, he said to the harvesters, the Lord be with you. The Lord bless you, they replied. Now, right away, we see that Boaz is a good man. He's a godly man. All right. And from what we can glean from this, that he's not married, but he's a good man. He's also a pretty wealthy man, that he has a field and fields, and he has workers. Verse 5. Boaz asked his servant who was in charge of his harvesters, and whose young woman is this? The servants answered, she is a young Moabite woman who returned with Naomi from the land of Moab. And she asked, will you let me gather fallen grain among the bundles behind the harvesters? She came and has remained from early morning until now, except that she rests a little in the shelter. Then Boaz said to Ruth, listen, my daughter, don't go and gather grain in another field, and don't leave this one, but stay here close to my female servants. See which field they are harvesting and follow them. Haven't I ordered the young men not to touch you? When you are thirsty, go and drink from the jars that the young men have filled. She bowed with her face to the ground and said to him, Why are you so kind to notice me, although I am a foreigner? But he answered, Everything you have done for your mother-in-law since your husband's death has been fully reported to me, how you left your father and mother in the land of your birth, and how you came to a people you didn't previously know. May the Lord reward you for what you have done, and may you receive a full reward from the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have now come for refuge. My Lord, she said, you have been so kind to me, for you have comforted and encouraged your slave, although I am not like one of the female servants. Now, Boaz obviously now begins to take notice of her. He kind of gets the 411 on it. He kind of looks at, hey, what's up with her? And one of the most interesting things that he notes is her character. He notices Ruth's godly character, and that's extremely important. Verse 14, at mealtime, Boaz told her, come over here and have some bread and dip it in vinegar sauce. So she sat beside the harvesters, and he offered her roasted grain. She ate and was satisfied and had some left over. And when she got up to gather the grain, Boaz ordered the young man, let her even gather grain among the bundles, and don't humiliate her. Put out some stalks from the bundles for her and leave them for her to gather. Don't rebuke her. So Ruth gathered grain from the field until the evening. She beat it out, what she had gathered, and it was about 26 quarts of barley. She picked up the grain and went into town, and when her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, then she brought out what she had left over from her meal and gave it to her. Then her mother-in-law said to her, where did you gather barley today, and where did you go to work? May the Lord bless the man who noticed you. Ruth told her mother-in-law about the men she worked hard with, and said, the name of the man I work with today is Boaz. Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, may the Lord bless, may he be blessed by the Lord, who has not forsaken his kindness and the living from the dead. And Naomi continued, the man is a close relative. He is one of our family redeemers. And Ruth the Moabite said, he also told me, stay with my young men until they have finished all of my harvest. So Naomi said to the daughter-in-law Ruth, my daughter, it is good for you to work with his female servants, so that nothing will happen to you in the field. And Ruth stayed close to Boaz's female servants and gathered grain until the barley and the wheat harvests were finished, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Now this is a wonderful story. This is a wonderful story in that what is being noticed up to this point, you're able to see the character of these people. That they just wasn't talking the talk, but what was said about them, what the rumors were, you were able to see it in their life. And what is interesting, of course, too, is that at this point, Ruth does not have in her mind, I'm going to marry this man. That's not to say that she didn't know him. It's like, hey, he's a pretty handsome guy. And not only is he handsome, but he's got some means. He's got some money. He's wealthy. That's not on her mind. She's not thinking about that. And it says she's kind of overwhelmed that man, he is taking notice of me. I mean, the grain is good. So far, what we can kind of glean from this is her thing was, man, whoever this man is, we're able to get some food. We're able to work for some food. Now, God is also at work in their hearts, which we will see. That God is at work in their hearts. Because if you stop and think about this, why would Ruth, a Moabite, have any other hope to be involved more than gleaning in the field? Why would she have any more hope? Why would she think, hey, who is this man, right? Why would she have any more hope than the job is good? And it's not a job either. It's a provision for the poor. But God is at work, and we're going to see how wonderfully God works. I'm going to say this too. I think this, for you singles and those singles who want to be married, be about God's business instead of just chasing a relationship, chasing what you think is, I want to use a term from a person who just recently passed away. Boaz was certainly a high-valued man. But more than a high-valued man, he was a godly man. That's what made his value more than anything else. Okay? All right, chapter 3 in the next study. I'll see you then.